So I'm standing here in front of a statue that should not exist. Banksy just put it up here about a month ago without a permit or an official commission, not even permission from the council. In the middle of the night, in the middle of London. Just put it up and walked away. And sure, by the time you're watching this statue might finally be gone, okay? But it's been here almost a month already, and nobody's done anything. Like, the council's just left it. And even by the looks of it, paid for a security guard to look after it. Someone, Banksy, randomly put up this statue in the centre of London, mocking the government, most definitely the United States government, and it's still here a month later. They'd fine me, they'd fine you. Like, if I put a statue in the middle of London, I'd have a fixed penalty notice before the cement had even dried, and I'd been able to post it on social media. Banksy does it, and the council schedule a removal for, I don't know, it's a busy month actually, maybe next month sometime, like they're cancelling a dentist appointment. And I say this, right, because the reason nobody's done anything about it for a month, if not more, tells you something really fascinating, really interesting about the world we live in today. So, this is the thing that Banksy keeps pointing at, and has, in fact, been pointing at ever since the beginning. Because graffiti, which is the thing he started with, the thing that made him, graffiti is not just vandalism. It is a philosophical position. It says, I am putting something up on this wall that you did not ask for, cannot own, did not pay for, and cannot stop other people from seeing and enjoying and finding value in it. Graffiti is, by definition, a public good in a system built entirely around private ones. So, Paul Samuelson's 1954 paper, called The Pure Theory of Public Expenditure. It defined public goods as non-excludable and non-rivalrous, which essentially means if everyone can see or enjoy a thing without diminishing anyone else's enjoyment of that thing, the market cannot price it. Fact. Which means the market treats something that everyone else has access to as worthless. Because the entire system of value that we've built is structurally blind to anything that it can't sell. Banksy creates public goods in a market designed for private ones. And then, well, sits back and watches what society does, or more accurately, what the market does. And what the market does is what the market always does. It tries to convert them.
We live in a world where one person can take a Banksy off a wall with a diamond saw, sell it for £500,000, and the neighbourhood, the world that had everything for free, gets nothing. Zilch, squat, diddly. Let me run you past that again because it might seem a bit baffling at first, right? Banksy makes a unique and fascinating piece of art that everyone can see and value and enjoy for free. But then another person runs off, finds some deeds, bits of paper, contacts some lawyers, and then gets the diamond saw out. And that person gets £500,000. But social value for every other human being gets destroyed entirely in the process, or hedged off for £20 a ticket. And the system calls that rational and efficient. That's just the market working exactly as it's meant to.
But the revolutionary question that Banksy keeps pointing at with the way that he conducts himself is, who decided this? And I don't mean who decided who owns the wall. The Duke of Westminster owns this wall. Who decided that ownership of a physical wall and the value that one person can extract from that thing matters more than the value of the thousands of other people that were already sharing it? And I'm just such a product of that world. Like, even asking that question seems a bit mad to me. Like, you know, it's obvious, Barry. It's monetary value. That's the king. Money talks. That's the world. That's human nature. That's just the way of things. It's obvious. What a stupid question. But how was that decided? That monetary value is the only value that counts. The other values, social value, cultural value, the value of something that belongs to everyone. Who decided that that doesn't count at all? Doesn't count at all. And it's a surprisingly hard question to answer. But it reminds me of a story that I heard once, a thought experiment. So you go to the estate of a lord or baron, like the one in this house perhaps, right? And you start building a house on their land. And the lord comes out and says, "What are you doing? This is my land." And you say, "Why is it your land?" "Well, my great-great-great-grandfather fought for this land." And you say, "Great, I'll fight you for it now then. Here and now, come on." And it sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's how it was decided back then. Why can't it be decided that way now? Oh, well, you see, my grandfather was holding the land when the music stopped, and that's when all the deeds got written. So owning land is like a giant game of musical chairs, is it? But one where the winner who has the chair forever. And that view of the world isn't even a secret. The rich even admit it to us and themselves. Like, for example, the Duke of Westminster. The Duke of Westminster, one of the wealthiest landowners in Britain, was once asked what advice he'd give to anyone that wanted to be as rich as he was. And his answer was, well, it does help to have a great-great-great-great-grandfather who knew William the Conqueror. That's what he said. The super wealthy know this, and they actually find it funny. That's ironic. And that's it. That's the foundation of the society that we live in. 1,000 years of legal architecture built on top of a fight that no one alive can remember. Property rights and inheritance rights are all resting on the fact that some men on horseback won a battle 1,000 years ago, and their descendants have been collecting rent ever since. We dress it up in theory now, but underneath that theory is the sword. Still. And it's not just in 1066 that huge parts of the land were taken away from people, because there were also the Enclosure Acts from the 1600s to the 1800s. Because a lot of the UK was actually owned by peasant farmers right up until the 1870s. And the Enclosure Acts were acts of parliament that converted common land into private property. Common land was basically land that villagers had farmed collectively for generations, like thousands of years. And it was land that wasn't owned by anyone specific because it belonged to everyone. And the Enclosure Acts, it got carved up, hedged off, and handed to landowners with parliamentary collections. 6.8 million acres were enclosed between 1760 and 1870 alone. 6.8 million acres enclosed. Oh, what a lovely Banksy you've got there. Velasquez, yes, I like that Banksy a lot. What a fantastic Banksy. I think I might enclose that Banksy, actually. Yes. Oh, sorry, that's my Banksy now. Thank you very much. So over that 200 to 300 years, there were over 5,000 individual acts of Parliament, Enclosure Acts. Each one essentially saying that thing that used to belong to everyone, I'm very sorry, but that belongs to Gerald now, because Gerald has connections in Parliament. And each act was a legal instrument for taking something that belonged to everyone and giving it to someone specific. Someone specific that had friends in Parliament. And the intellectual justification at the time made perfect sense. Perfect sense to the people making it, who were essentially, to a man, lords that had all been educated in the same place together. And the justification was, you peasants don't know how to manage common land, you see. We are the wealth creators, we're the job creators. Which is remarkable, isn't it? Because the jobs they were creating at that time were stand in a factory for 14 hours or starve and all your children starve. So, well, actually, yeah, thanks for that job, Gerald. That's a great job that you've created there. Thanks for taking the time for creating that job. Gonna love that. And it was always the same argument. The Commons were inefficient. Garrett Hardin, his Tragedy of the Commons essay from 1968, is probably the most modern citation for that argument, okay? And it gave this argument its most modern and famous kind of rendition. And that essay and perspective is taught in economics degrees the world over as facts about the world and human psychology and why property rights are important. The tragedy of the commons, you see, it's tragedy. It's common ownership is a tragedy. You need someone to own it and manage it properly. Otherwise, the commons will get destroyed. It's a tragedy. And there's only one problem with the tragedy of the commons theory, just one, and that's that it wasn't true and it never was, right? So in 2009, the Nobel Prize was given to ELINOR, who had spent 40 years studying actual commons around the world. from Swiss alpine meadows that have been managed collectively, Japanese forests with communal governance systems dating back centuries, Spanish irrigation networks, lobster fisheries in Maine. And what ELINOR found consistently was that communities developed sophisticated rules which were enforced socially, and that they sustained shared resources indefinitely without privatisation and without state control. Because the tragedy that HARDIN predicted wasn't inevitable. It was a theoretical assumption about isolated, anonymous individuals, which is not what communities are. OSTROM won the Nobel Prize in Economics for that in 2009 for proving that fact clearly and beyond doubt. Because that's what you get Nobel Prizes for. Proving it clearly and beyond doubt. The tragedy of the commons is not true. It's not a fact, and it never was. Which means the Enclosure Acts were not a necessary correction to a failing system. They were the destruction of a working one. Because the commons weren't collapsing, but they were enclosed anyway. Because the argument, it was just never about efficiency. E.P. Thompson's The Making of the English Working Class from 1963 makes that actual reason plain. Enclosure drove the largest forced migration, internal migration in British history. Hundreds of thousands of rural people that had subsisted on common land for thousands of years, grazing animals, gathering fuel, farming, planting trees, building, hunting. They lost the resource that kept them alive and were pushed into the new industrial cities, which was in no way an accidental side effect. Because the factory system needed a landless workforce to take on. Nobody was choosing to go into the factories, right? The factories, by the way, were incidentally owned by the same people who happened to have friends in Parliament who happened to be the ones enclosing the land. Coincidence? People with access to common land and their own sustainable life had options. They're not going to go into the factories, so who's going to work in the factories? However, people without access to common land have just one option: work or starve. The enclosures also manufactured dependency. The Enclosure Acts took a whole class of people that already had genuine economic autonomy and converted them into cheap labour by removing every alternative. The owner class got the land, the parliamentary class got the rent, and an entire population got dark, satanic mills, because now they had no choice. And the justification was always productivity. Private ownership generates incentives, markets allocate efficiently, and the commons is just a waste of efficiency waiting to be improved. That's just what's best for everyone. Well, what actually happened though was that an entire class of people lost the resource that kept them alive. They didn't become more productive. They became cheap labour because now they had no choice. Banksy's wall, getting removed with a diamond saw, is the same logic in a different century. The common resource of art, made for everyone, placed where everyone can see it, gets privatised the moment that somebody with property rights decides that the financial value is extractable. The neighbourhood loses what it had, one person takes the money, and the justification is identical. Property rights, market value, legal ownership. It's just we don't call it enclosure anymore. This is where we get to the psychology. The most disturbing thing about the whole theory of the tragedy of the commons, right, is that it's not just wrong. It's wrong in a way that makes itself true. And let me explain what I mean by that, okay? So ELINOR OSTROM, she proved that the theory of the tragedy of the commons was false, right? With 40 years of fieldwork. But while OSTROM was out in the real world, finding out what humans actually do in the real world, economists were in classrooms teaching economics students what humans supposedly are, teaching the theory of the tragedy of the commons. It has been taught in almost every single economics university course the world over, at least for the last 70 years, and it is taught as fact. And then, someone decided to measure what actually happens to economics students when you teach them the tragedy of the commons as fact. Gerald Marwel and Ruth Ames ran a simple experiment. They gave people money, right, and a choice. You can put the money into a private bank account and you keep the money. Or you can put it into a shared account where everyone benefits, but you will get less personally. Now, the selfish move is obvious, right? But what happened is that most people didn't exclusively take the selfish move. Across 11 different versions of the experiment, the average person put nearly half their money into the shared pot, 50% of their money, voluntarily. Why? Well, because that's what people do. Then they ran the same experiments with first-year economics students, right? People that had studied tragedy of the commons. And what did the economic students put into the shared pot? 20%. 20%. The researchers called their paper Economists' Free Ride. Does anyone else? Because they had learnt, those students had learnt that human beings were selfish. So they were acting on what they'd learnt. The theory created the actions, not the other way around. You might think, right, well, maybe selfish people are just drawn to economics. Maybe it's just who applies. Well, actually, other researchers have tested that too. They measured students before and after taking economics classes, right? The same students. And what they found was that taking economics classes, specifically learning that humans are self-interested by nature, made students measurably less generous and less interested in contributing to shared goals. Because the humans are selfish theory, it doesn't describe them, it infects them. Because if you teach people in school that humans are fundamentally selfish, right, and that shared resources inevitably collapse, right, and if you tell them that over and over again, that cooperation is naive, right, and self-interest is the only adult and rational way to act in the world, people believe it. And then they act accordingly. And when they do act accordingly, of course, you can then point at their behaviour and go, see, we told you, we were right, weren't we, that people are selfish and self-interested. It is therefore the only adult and rational thing to do in the world is to be selfish. The tragedy of the commons, you see, is not a description of human nature. It is an instruction manual, but one disguised as a diagnosis. That's absolutely, fundamentally, scientifically true. The tragedy of commons is an instruction manual disguised as a diagnosis. And for 50 years, 50 to 70 years, we've been handing that instruction manual to 18-year-olds in their first term and calling it economics. Which suddenly makes sense of the banking and investment centres, right? Because if all economics students learn that people are inherently selfish, and then they act more selfishly because of that, and they're the people that run our finances, no wonder our economy runs on millionaires and landowners justifying their own monstrous behaviour with, it's just the natural way of things, man. It's human nature. We're all like this. If it wasn't me doing it, you'd be doing it. You're just jealous. You want to be this rich. Saying it and acting monstrously, even believing it, gives them license to act monstrously because they believe that their own monstrous behaviour is adult. It's the adult, rational, responsible way of living in the world. But Nobel Prize winners have proven that it is just a story that changes you if you believe in it. It's like the circular debate that we always have about wealth taxes. What's the most common criticism? You can't tax millionaires and billionaires. You can't tax the wealth creators. They're the ones that create the wealth. Without them, we won't have any wealth. It's just market forces. People act like that and they're just taking advantage of neutral market forces. But actually, it is just a story, which means that them leaving is their decision. It's a choice to screw over the society where they built up their wealth in exchange for an extra 2%, 5% of taxation. It's not market forces. Market forces is a story that they tell themselves and us to make themselves feel good and fine about screwing other people over. These peasant farmers, they can't be trusted to manage wealth. They just don't understand it, you see. Not like I do. It's a story. and we can choose a different one. And this is what Banksy keeps showing us. The message isn't just as simple as the system is unfair. The message is that the whole system is telling us a story about itself, a story about efficiency and rationality and value, and a story that fundamentally is not true, not the whole story by any stretch. A story that's just acting like it's totally the way of the world, man. That's just the way humans are, just accept it. No. It's a story, actually, that free market capitalists tell themselves in order to excuse what is essentially unhealthy and awful behaviour that harms people. She'll tell you about it. In technical terms, in buyers' terms, it's something called moral licensing, which is you have a wider justification for individual harms because it's for the greater good. And because we're all born into that story, it's the waters we swim in. We just kind of have taken it on. We learnt it at school and we know it deeply in our bones, so we just accept it. And yet, actually, in our individual lives, in a deeper sense, we know that social value is real. The people around us, our communities, is what we thrive in, how we survive, and we experience that in our lives every single day. Free market capitalism is just a story, a very expensive story with excellent PR and several thousand acts of parliament behind it. And every Banksy shows us that monetary value winning isn't inevitable. It isn't natural. And actually, it's not the logical conclusion of human nature and civilization. It's a choice. A choice made, actually, by people who benefit from it, and enforced by them, and enforced by law, and dressed up in theory so it looks like common sense and just the way of the world, whereas in fact, it's anything but. So what Banksy's street art tells us, what this statue behind me tells us, is that the fight over who owns culture is really a fight over whose value counts. Does monetary value matter more than cultural value or community? Does one person's ability to be able to make money or extract profit matter more than everyone's ability to share something or to live? Under current law, yes, absolutely. The diamond saw wins every single time. But Banksy keeps asking the question. This statue, every piece of street art, is an assertion that some things should belong to everyone and that social value is real. When everything has a price, nothing belongs to all of us. And when nothing belongs to all of us, the wealthy own everything. Even, as Banksy shows again and again with a smile on his face, they even own the rebellion against them.
Here you go, Barry. If you jump up on that bin, I reckon I can get the mile west up there, and I'll stand on the other side of the road and I can film it. Probably look all right.
Yeah, so you are?
My name's Luke. I'm Luke. I'm a walking tour guide here in Bristol. Know a thing or two about Banksy and its history. Nice to see you.
And what's your tour guide name? What's the name of the site?
Blackbeard to Banksy is our main tour that we run. It's a 2-hour tour all about the history and street art of Bristol. Hey!